We're going to speak today with some of the people that have been affected by sloppy, unsafe practices by oil and gas drilling companies. The faces of fracking, as I call them. You'll meet people whose wells have been contaminated, whose lives have been turned upside down, whose homes have been devalued, whose bloodstreams have been poisoned. And you're going to hear them tell you all they want is their lives back. This is a tough, tough time for an awful lot of residents of Bradford County. And they're good people. They're people that love their community. They're people that love their nation and believe that by cooperating with the gas companies, they're going to end our dependence on foreign oil. But they didn't deserve the deal they got. Our commissioner up here, Mark Smith, wrote a letter to the governor in which he said, the gas industry is not the golden goose any more than it is the tooth fairy or Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. It's an industry that needs to be held accountable. And hopefully, those of us that have an opportunity to represent these people will hold the gas companies accountable and require safe drilling practices. Safety first, profit second. That's all we ask. Crystal, people have asked me what motivated you to have this press conference and to come out here and to write a letter to the governor and to really get involved in a way that's a little unconventional for a lawyer. And it was a meeting at your kitchen table. When I learned about the problems you were having and the fears and anxieties you had. And then I learned that you didn't sit home and feel sorry for yourself, but you went knocking on doors. And you talked to other people. And you took me up to Leroy and we saw one of your friends' countertops that had been pitted as a result of water from their well. You are truly one of the faces of fracking. And I know you have it in you to continue the fight, but just tell our audience what it's like to learn that your well has been contaminated.
My world fell apart. My husband and I were planning on putting an addition on our house so I could put a hair salon in. So we were kind of excited about that and ready to move on, have more kids. And when I learned that, I was sick from the water I had been drinking for the past 4 or 5, who knows how many weeks, it just, everything fell apart. I knew at that point, who's going to want to give us money to, add on to our house or to put a business in our house when the well is shot. Nobody's going to be able to drink that water. Our land has a lot of sulfur in it, sulfur mineral rock. It's very brittle rock. They go to drill another well on my 2 acres. That well's going to have the same thing in it that my current well has.
You recently had your water tested.
Yes.
And it came back with high levels of what?
Barium, manganese, lead at 4 times the action limit. Oh boy, gross alpha, gross beta, which are radiological materials. Thinking, it's 6 pages, there's
and you've had your
chloride.
You've had your blood tested.
I've had my blood tested. My barium levels came back yesterday at 110. The normal should be 0, but a normal range could be less than 10 also, but not 110. I guess those levels are just, kind of out of sight.
You're going to continue the fight?
I am. I have to. I'm worried about my son's health, my health.
How old is your son?
He's 4 years old.
Your son visited with us yesterday when we went to your neighbor's house and saw what had happened to them. And do you feel like your government let you down?
That's an understatement.
Thank you. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Oh, you're welcome.
When we talk about the faces of fracking, there's one face that I become very familiar with. She and her husband, Bruce, live with a well almost in their kitchen.
Yes, it's approximately 600 feet behind my back door.
Their water has been contaminated. How long did it take before you got anything done?
Our well became contaminated in June of 2010. It's 10 months later, and very, very little has been done outside of Chesapeake has agreed to pay for a few water tests, and they supply us with bottled water.
And your methane levels in your well are how high?
Our last test was over 64 mega units per liter.
And that's certainly not something that EPA suggests that you drink.
No, DEP has given us a letter stating that over 24 units, your water is completely saturated, and at that point becomes an explosive hazard.
And you're familiar, because you've been working long and hard with a lot of the people that are facing the same problems you are, of people whose well caps have blown off. You, of course, are familiar with the folks down on Paradise Road who were evacuated from their home. Are you worried?
I am very worried. I am extremely concerned, especially considering the recent events in Leroy.
Do you think your government has let you down?
Our government has failed to protect us in this regard.
And Sherry, the fact that every day you go home and you couldn't sell that house to anybody now with a contaminated well, could you?
I would find it very difficult to do so.
So you're pretty well locked in your own home.
I'm stuck with 197 acres of unusable property.
And your father-in-law or your father and mother live right behind it?
Yes, they live on a 3-acre parcel that they sectioned off from the main farm.
And they're facing the same problems?
They are. In fact, they were told that recently Chesapeake has proposed a filter system, but it was only going to be provided while they're in that home. And they are elderly senior citizens.
Keep up the good work, Sherry, and keep fighting.
I will do my best.
Thank you. Our guest now is Diane Sigmund, a licensed psychologist, but also someone who has worked long and hard to protect the environment here in Bradford County and the corridor around Towanda. We worked together on air quality issues long before fracking. And Diane, have you ever seen anything like the havoc that is wreaked on the families that have been adversely affected by this hydraulic fracking?
I don't think there is anything like it, and I think our community was grossly unprepared. Initially, we got actually wrong information. We were told when we started hearing about it slowly about 2.5 years ago that there was going to be drilling and that they were going to put sand and water. We even had a meeting at the Towanda High School where people from various organizations came and assured us. I don't know whether they had the full story at that point, but we really were misled. And now we have a situation where people are being harmed and they aren't even sure what's wrong with them.
Much has been said about frac fluid, but many of the people that I represent have their wells contaminated by methane. Mm-hmm. And frequently the drilling company will say, well, gee whiz, shallow methane's been here forever. Everybody has methane in their water. But in many cases, these wells had been tested, come back pure, and all of a sudden they are devastated mm-hmm. with methane. Mm-hmm. And as a result, the homes are valueless, and we have people that are tremendously depressed. Are you seeing much depression?
I'm seeing a tremendous amount of frustration, depression, a huge amount of anxieties, almost to the point where the person becomes irrational with the feeling of being trapped, the feeling of being frustrated, not having the answer. We don't have the proper support in terms of DEP, and we have lack of funding now in terms of oversight. The little-known fact as far as private well owners, a person just in a regular property, a single well, DEP is not required even to get involved unless it's a group of at least 25, and a lot of people don't know that, because I've heard people tell me, well, just get DEP involved. Well, you know what? That isn't going to happen. And so the level of despair, the family conflict that creates when children get sick.
The isolation. I see people that I represent that feel isolated, that feel almost like they're being unfair to their neighbors because they're creating problems which may affect the royalties of a friend or a neighbor. And it's so far from the truth, and it's so sad.
Well, it pits people against people, good people against good people. The feeling of abandonment where there's no resource. Fact is, up until just recently, there was no acknowledgement that contamination even existed, as crazy as that sounds.
One of the answers to a DEP complaint made by Chesapeake was that the methane migration was caused by an earthquake in Quebec. Had nothing to do with the well 1,500 feet that was
Really?
banging through the...
Really?
Thank you for what you do. I mean it
Welcome.
sincerely. This is a tough time for all of us, and we'll be working hard and long on this, Diane. And thank you.
Oh,
You're
thank
great.
you. Thank you,
very
Todd.
much.
Thank you.